I was the only female director or above. And so I'm on this leadership team with VPs, senior VPs, C-levels. What am I doing in here? I recall distinctly my boss's boss is also at this table and he's a C-level. It got around to me to give an update and he said, she doesn't have an update today. And I looked over at some of the individuals in the room that I would consider mentors. I looked at him and he goes, well, I'd like to hear her update. And then a couple other people. Well, yeah, so would I. I'd like to hear her update. Well, okay, because I have a great update for you today. And, gave my update. And leaving the room, looking at my boss's boss and seeing him glare at me, that's what life was like for women in business, trying to claw our way up and to get that seat at the table. So here I had a seat at the table, but it was not necessarily a welcomed seat. So I had to learn early on how to navigate situations like that.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Melea McRae. Melea is an entrepreneur and marketing executive who has held a variety of executive marketing positions in a variety of industries, ranging from chainsaws to plastic kitchenware to corporate identity products. She is currently the founder and CEO of Crux KC, a fractional CMO provider envisioning itself as the unagency, combining executive-level marketing and business strategy to provide a simple, smart, and affordable outsourced marketing solution for clients. You can learn more about Melea at cruxkc.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Melea.
Melea, welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Well, hello, Jeff. I am honored to be here with you today.
I'm excited to talk to you. We met when I did a brief stint at the United Way of Greater Kansas City, and you and I were on the marketing committee together. You were one of the probably 8 outside advisors on that committee. So, and I knew you because of your great story at Crux. So we'll get to that in a second. Yeah, let's start with a fun question. So you're pretty transparent out there, with all your accomplishments and what you're doing and on your various social media. But what one thing would surprise people about you, Melea, even people that know you fairly well?
I am very transparent. I like to say that I'm an open book. I think a lot of people would probably be surprised to learn that I grew up in a very small town on a farm. I actually had to work on the farm growing up, and I think that definitely built a lot of grit and determination in terms of my, go get things done spirit and attitude. So yeah, I grew up in a small town in Nebraska.
Okay, nice. What was your least favorite job on the farm?
Have you ever done roguing and detasseling?
I grew up in Peekskill, New York, about an hour from the city. I'm going to have a hard no on that question.
All right. So those listeners that have ever done that is very hard manual labor, long days. Roguing is you're basically cutting weeds out of soybean fields. And detasseling, I still don't really understand, but you're pulling the tassels off of certain rows of corn, really wearing like a raincoat as you're walking through because you're getting wet and you're getting hit with all these corn row leaves and things. So it's not glamorous. work by any stretch. In fact, your listeners might be surprised to learn that I did that in high school.
And you look just so nice now, dressed up, professional. I just can see you on the farm. I just published Maria Flynn, another Kansas City entrepreneur, and she was a farm girl from Western Kansas. So there you go. So what was fun for you growing up? What did you love doing as a kid?
I was into dance growing up. I probably did dance for 12 years, tap, ballet, jazz. I choreographed the musical in high school my senior year. That was probably my claim to fame in terms of my dance career,
Wow.
leading
What
up
was the
to
musical?
my carousel.
Oh, nice.
I loved doing musicals. I loved the dancing aspect. I was on the dance team, so I got to perform the halftime routines at football and basketball games, and I oftentimes choreographed those as well. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think one time I was about 36 years old. I was at a friend's wedding, and one of the parents of the that was attending the wedding said, white men over 35 should not fast dance. So I have not danced since that time.
I tend to agree with that statement.
What aspirations as a child did you have? When I'm adult, I'm going to be this. Was it a dancer, or was it something else?
I think I went through what most children go through, vetting out career path. For me, it was a path to earning an income that was going to be sustainable. I was very driven as a child. I joke that I think it was for my for Halloween when I was 10 years old. I actually dressed up as a business owner, and I probably didn't know the name entrepreneur then, but I was a female BA entrepreneur. I just know I was. And I carried a briefcase with all my paper products in
Wow.
it. And I went trick-or-treating like that. Kind of hilarious to think back on that. But I think that growing up, I was always very driven just to get to my career. I kind of felt like I had to check the box on school and college, but I really just wanted to get to that career and start making an impact and earning money to support myself and maybe my shopping habit.
Did you have a role model?
Probably more honestly, Jeff, from watching movies, TV shows, Murphy Brown. Remember Murphy Brown?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Um, but also my dance coach. She had her own business, and I
Yeah.
thought that was really cool. My dad, I call him my bonus dad. He became my bonus dad when I was 9, and he's incorporated with his brothers. They own a big farm, and they're cattle ranchers and farmers. So again, that's kind of where I probably learned that drive to just to be independent, to get things done, take care of yourself. My real dad died when I was very young. I was 5 years old, but he was an entrepreneur. He was a pharmacist, and he had his own. Do you remember those little 5 and dime stores where you could get the milkshake
Yeah.
up front, and you could go kind of buy little odds and ends and then get your prescription filled in the back. So he owned one of those when I was very young, and I have some memories of him kind of wearing that business owner hat. So I think I probably had a lot of different role models that kind of inspired me to go out on my own.
Yeah, I wouldn't normally ask this question, but I had a similar. My mom died a day before my 5th birthday. How did that impact you growing up?
I think it makes you grow up a lot faster. It makes you also really appreciate, like I was very close with my mother after that, right? Really makes you appreciate the ones that you have. My grandparents, I was very close with as well. You just kind of have to step into raising yourself a little bit. So my mom was a single mom between, I would have been 5 to 9. My brother would have been 7 to 11. And those were busy years for kids. And she
Right.
was working as an orthodontist assistant in a small town in south central Nebraska. We had moved to be closer to her parents so that they could help, my grandparents. And I watched, how challenging it was for her. And so my brother and I pretty much raised ourselves. So I think that you do just grow up a lot faster.
So, what was your journey? You were probably in every activity in high school and various clubs, I'm sure. So, what was your kind of thought process? Oh, after high school, where am I going?
It's really funny. I took a lot of business courses. I really did gravitate towards business law, There were some marketing classes. My friends will tell you, I don't necessarily remember this as well as they remember this. I don't know if that happens to you, but I don't remember a whole lot about high school. I think it's because I moved away when I first graduated and I never moved back. But there's a lot of people that stay in that environment and then they have all those memories. And
They're
I
reliving it a lot more than you are.
reliving it a lot more. And I think, gosh, how do you remember that? So one of my best friends from high school actually lives in Kansas City now. And she loves to tell the story. We're in senior class. We were taking an advertising class our senior year, I should say. And I was going to launch my own ad agency. I did
Okay.
not, I did not remember that. I apparently invented a product that I launched as well, kind of along with that I was marketing. And she said to me, I was always so envious because you knew exactly what you were going to do. Well, no, I didn't. I thought about being a dentist. I was going to be a computer programmer. So DeVry here in Kansas City was recruiting heavily at my school. They would go around to these small town high schools. Mine was Adams Central High, affectionately referred to as Cow Pie High. It was a country school outside of Hastings, Nebraska. So they were recruiting heavily in some of these country schools. And I thought, you know what? I could be a coder. I can do that. I will say that technology came out within my high school, probably my junior year. I was definitely intrigued by this technology. And I thought, okay, I can code. Really before this whole movement around girls who code, right? This was the
Right.
very thing. And I thought, I can get to the next nearest big city. So I think that growing up in a small town in Nebraska, I felt like I was a little misplaced and I needed to get to a bigger city. I just needed to. So it was either going to be Denver or it was going to be Kansas City. And so I came to Kansas City. I started going to DeVry. I met some great people along the way that were, they worked in the business community of Kansas City. And I like to say that's probably where my network started to grow because of some of those relationships. I realized that I was a square peg in a round hole. I did not like to code, didn't like it at all. In fact, I realized very quickly I'm much more of a people person. So I took all kinds of career aptitude tests while I quit and decided, okay, I have a second chance at this. What am I going to do next? And all signs pointed to marketing. Going back to my drive and wanting to get to an income and independence, financial independence on my own very early on, I had, in that interim of figuring out what am I going to do next, I took a job as an office manager with a local government agency. And oh my gosh, I loved it. I took over this office. They had this huge old word processor sitting there collecting dust, Jeff. I mean, the big, where you'd use the paper that was like green lines and then white lines. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
I started, and their executive director, I fired that thing up and I started using it. And he said, "You know how to use this thing?" I said, "Of course I know how to use this thing." He's like, "Oh my God, you're hired." So I worked there by day and went to school by night. So I shifted to Webster University, changed majors to business management with an emphasis in marketing. And because it was night classes too, there were a lot of professors that were, working in the business community, business leaders in Kansas City, and I made those connections. So the minute that I graduated, I had a really great job offer at Stewart Hall, which I can actually see the Stewart Hall building
Right.
outside of
Kansas
my
City.
window.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was a product manager for the school product line at Stewart Hall. So I did B2C marketing out of the gate, worked for a lot of consumer products companies. And with that job, I was working on all their licensed products. So, the cover of the notebook would have a NASCAR driver on it. Well, I would go around to middle schools across the country and do consumer research on their favorite NASCAR drivers. Or I was working with Coca-Cola. We were doing the Coca-Cola Bears and a series of those covers, or MTV and Nickelodeon, Warner Brother Looney Tunes. So it was this fascinating entry into consumer products marketing by way of licensing. So it was an incredible first job in
All right.
marketing out of the gate.
Yeah. That is. Yeah. I think I was a guest speaker in Webster at a night class in the 90s, but
God,
I
I
don't know.
wonder if you were one of my guest speakers. That would have been incredible.
That's what probably, that's when you dropped that class probably after I spoke. Yeah, so you stayed at Stewart for a little bit, and did you go from Stewart Hall to the rival company?
I did. I went to Rival
Yeah.
next. I like to say, Jeff, I was a millennial before it was cool. And I was known as a job hopper, my friend. I would probably change jobs every 2 years.
I I I
Again,
I did notice that, and it's so funny because I was actually called a job hopper.
you
Um,
were?
yeah, but the funny thing is, I changed jobs involuntarily. I only made one voluntary move, really. If I would go to the company or a division, shit would happen. But I did notice that. But yeah, so sum up kind of those early years and some of your key learnings at Rival and you had McCullough, I think, or
Yeah,
yeah,
chainsaws. Oh,
yeah,
I could write a couple chapters
chainsaws,
about
Tupperware, um,
Tupperware.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Sunbeam.
Sunbeam, yeah.
I had the hand mixers, the stand mixers, the toaster ovens. I had a lot of Sunbeam products in my house. I still do, as a matter of fact. I have a lot of Tupperware because that stuff lasts forever. Yeah, I can recall in job interviews always having to answer that question. Well, you appear to be a job hopper. Tell me about that. Why should we hire you? And I would say, well, I've bettered myself in my position with every move, and it's on my pathway of becoming a marketing generalist. Wanted to work in communications. I wanted to work in market research, product development, what have you. And so, I was still getting the job offers. So I guess it was okay to be a job hopper.
Yeah, because it was frowned upon back then. I mean,
Oh, it was very much
a lot
frowned
of
upon.
people wouldn't even interview you if you were,
Right.
which it was just
Hmm.
so stupid,
Hmm.
And I even
Yeah.
think today some hiring managers will not look at job hoppers. And like, it's crazy because today's world is, I think the average tenure at a company is less than 4 years now on average.
I think even with CEOs, the average tenure anymore. CMOs for sure, chief
Oh,
marketing officers, the average tenure is around 2 years,
yeah,
uh, which is kind of crazy to think about. But
yeah.
yes, it was very much frowned upon in those days. I went to Rival and I used my licensing experience to bring the first licensed product to the Rival company. And it was a partnership with Jim Davis and Garfield. And I got to go to the Garfield campus and meet Jim Davis. And we brought him to the Consumer Products Show in Chicago that year to launch. It was the Humbug, but in Garfield form. So that was a really fun project to work on. And I'll be very honest with you, Jeff. I think that I would see these things through to the finish line because I have to get to the finish line on these things, that they're fun projects, they're meaningful projects, they're kind of game changers for some of these companies by some definitions. Then I would get bored.
Right.
And then I would have to go for the next. And sometimes the boredom was, I just don't want to live in the Midwest anymore. So that's what took me to McCullough Chainsaws in Tucson, Arizona. I wanted to live in the Southwest and experience that. And so I would move without knowing a soul. Definitely fearless would be one of my words in my word cloud. So I did that for a few years and learned a lot about consumer research and communications. That was the first job where I had a team, 5 people reporting to me. So I became a manager for the first time. So
Wow. When you were at McCullough, the chainsaw company, it had to be probably male dominated. What was that like?
I was the only female director or above. Jim Milligan was our CEO. He put me on the leadership team because I was the only female
Wow.
director or above. And so I'm on this leadership team with VPs, senior VPs, C levels going, what am I doing in here?
Right.
And then this was at a time, Jeff, where I recall distinctly my boss's boss is also at this table, and he's a C level. He was the head of sales and marketing. It got around to me to give an update, and he said she doesn't have an update today.
Oh,
And
wow.
I looked up, and I looked over at some of the individuals in the room that I would consider mentors. So Fred Shervala, our COO, was one of those individuals, and I looked at him, and he goes, "Well, I'd like to hear her update." And then a couple other people. Well, yeah, so would I. I'd like to hear an update. And until Jim Milligan, the CEO, finally said it too. And I go, well, okay, because I have a great update for you today. And, gave my update.
Right.
And leaving the room, looking at my boss's boss and seeing him glare at me, that's what life was like for women in
Yeah.
business, trying to claw our way up and to get that seat at the table. So here I had the seat at the table, but it was not necessarily a welcomed seat. So I had to learn early on how to navigate situations like that.
Yeah, that's great. You had male mentors that backed you up and supported you.
I was very fortunate in my career, Jeff. I've probably had more male mentors supporting me than female, to be very honest.
You go to Tupperware. Was that in Tucson also, or that was another city?
That was Orlando, Florida. So now I'm trying the Southeast out.
Oh, wow.
Talk about muggy.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my Lord. I went from dry to very humid. That was such I think a really impactful move for me in my career. So I go to work for one of the top brands in the world. I think it ranked number 3 at that time in terms of brand recognition globally, right? And a few weeks after I started, they hired a new president of Tupperware North America, a female, Betty Palm. And Betty Palm walked in, and I thought, like, she has a presence about her, and she has gravitas. Before I even knew what that word meant, I knew
Right.
that she had that. And she was wearing a pantsuit. Now, this was a big thing, Jeff, because prior to that, at Tupperware, women had to wear skirts and hosiery.
Had to.
Had to. In Orlando, Florida, where it's humid
Right.
and 100 degrees like year round. So I walked up to her and welcomed her. And I said, I noticed that you're wearing a pantsuit. And she looked at me funny and she goes, well, yes. And I said, does that mean that I can wear a pantsuit? And she said, well, why can't you? And I said, oh, I'm really going to like you working here.
Wow.
She and I became fast friends. And I mean, I'm 5 levels removed from her. I'm a
Right.
lowly product manager, and she's basically the CEO of Tupperware North America.
You moved from there to Sunbeam, it looked like.
Sunbeam,
Yeah.
Boca Raton, Florida. Now that's where, if you're going to live in Florida, you want to live Southeast Florida on the beach.
Yeah.
That I probably had the time of my life there, way too much fun than one person should have. And a lot of the my teammates were young and single, like I was young and single, and we just had the time of our lives. We were always, I mean, you're between West Palm, Delray Beach, Boca, Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and the Keys. A lot of energy down there, a lot of things to do, and I made a lot of fast friends, just my coworkers that I worked with.
And then you come to Kansas City again, it looked like House of Lloyd. What was the impetus behind that change?
So I met a boy who lived in Kansas City as I was flitting around the country. And we decided that if we were going to be together, we should probably live in the same city. So I moved back to Kansas City in 2000, 2001 timeframe. Enter Betty Palm into the equation again, the one who was the president of Tupperware North America. She was recruited by a private equity firm out of New York to be the new CEO at House of Lloyd. She found out that I was contemplating moving back to Kansas City. I had stayed close to her when I went to Sunbeam. And she said, I'm hiring you, name your price. And I said, I don't know if I want to work in direct selling again. I'm thinking about doing something different. She said, I don't care, you're coming to work for me, name your price. So I did go to work for her and I did name my price.
There you go.
And so I rode that wave until House of Lloyd closed its doors. Now she was trying to really reinvent, rename, recalibrate what had been known more as holiday decorations and, dare I say, tchotchke. She wanted to really elevate it and make it more Williams Sonoma-esque, if you will. So as a product manager, that was a really fun job, going out there and sourcing products for our catalog for these home parties, doing a lot of market research around that. She had signed on a lot of big named influencers, people that were regularly on the Today Show out of New York. And she had those connections through this PE firm. And literally, I think 2 weeks before the big national conference where we were going to launch the new product line, the PE firm pulled the plug on the company. And we were all very surprised. That was the first time in my career that I walked into the office to realize that I didn't have a job and pack your boxes and you have to go home.
Wow. That's something. So what did you do at that point?
I realized that marketing jobs in Kansas City were going to be a little bit hard to come by. Sprint and Hallmark had just laid off 200, 300 marketers at that same time. And I thought, wow, what am I going to do? The competition's going to be fierce. So I actually took a 4-month breather, really spent some time kind of reassessing, do I want to stay in this consumer products lane? What do I want to do next with my marketing career? So I took a hiatus and I went to work at Nordstrom for 4 months and never took home a paycheck because of the discount, Jeff.
I was going to say, did somebody else pick up your paycheck every?
I shopped every day basically for 4 months, and I thought, okay, oh my God.
What was the employee discount at Nordstrom?
40%.
There you go.
Even off the sale price.
Even on the anniversary sale. Nice.
Even on the anniversary sale, which is going on right now. Yes. Yes. So I realized that was not going to be the path for me, although I had met the Nordstrom brothers. Our store was one of the top performing in the country. A couple of the Nordstrom sons had come out to visit our store, and I met with them. And next thing I knew, I was getting a job offer to be a merchandiser in Chicago, at their store in Chicago. And I probably could have made a career. I love I am a fan of Nordstrom. I am a fan of their customer service. I'm just a fan of their stores in general, their cafes, all of it. I probably could have ridden that wave, but I wasn't ready to leave Kansas City again. So I decided, okay, I need to get a real job now that I can actually take a paycheck home. And so I actually made the move to the B2B side of marketing and went to work for, well, it's now Staples, a division of Staples, but when I went there, it was called American Identity. And they were doing the corporate branded merchandise for Fortune 1000 companies, Anheuser-Busch, IBM, General Motors, and building websites where employees could go out and earn points or buy branded apparel and pens and cups. So all the promo products for these brands. So I worked on the marketing team, which marketed the brand of American Identity. And then I also helped on the sales side with landing these big accounts. It was fun. We got to be really creative. We would pitch companies like Best Buy or H&R Block. The RFP responses were designed almost like you would imagine an architectural firm does. I mean, they are overly designed. And so it was really a fun, creative job for me. And I made a lot of great friends in Kansas City during that time in my life.
You talked about being, having that entrepreneurial bug. I mean, I've heard a lot of stories of people growing up and aspirations, what they're going to be when they grow up. Never heard of anyone dressing up as a business person on Halloween with a briefcase and all that stuff. So, you had this itch, it seemed like, but you're basically going from job to job. Now, did you have a thought process? You're about at this point in your career, about 12, 13 years into your professional career. As you were doing these transitions, were you thinking of going out on your own? Had that appeared yet in your mind?
Have you read the book, The Originals, How Nonconformists Rule the World by Adam Grant?
I have not, but I will put that on my list.
Put that on your book list. I read that. It was required reading when I was at Rockhurst getting my executive MBA, which I started in 2018 and finished in 2020. When I read that book, Jeff, it was like lightning struck, and I realized, oh my gosh, somebody gets me. So I think that in retrospect, the job hopping, getting bored, I would have to come up with and chase a new idea, like the Garfield humbug massager, or at McCullough, it was a line of string trimmers for women. And I led that launch. Or at Tupperware, I boldly went up to Betty Palm and I said, why are we only selling plastics? And she looked at me like, well, what did you have in mind? And I said, well, I don't know. Why don't we sell accessories? Like, how about those cute little dip packets that you could make a dip and put in one of your plastics? Or could we do candles in some little plastic bowls? Or could we have textiles, placemats, you name it. And she said, well, I love this idea. And she sent me on a shopping spree to trade shows around the country. And I got all these samples and I put them together in a conference room that I staged. I merchandised it. And I had like a gardening theme. I had an entertainment party theme. I can't remember what else, candles, probably date night, something like that. And I brought her down and I walked her through this. And here it is. Some silly 27-year-old at the time is probably trying to reinvent the way that Tupperware does business, right? But I think I was so fearless and bold and not looking at it as upsetting the apple cart, but looking at it as reinventing something, like infusing some new energy into a brand.
You really were an intrapreneur, within the company.
Yeah.
You were thinking of new innovative ideas for products and go to market and licensing and things like that.
So I would bring these fresh ideas kind of every stop that I made. It wasn't until that I read that book that I realized that's exactly what I was doing. I was an entrepreneur before I, again, knew what that meant. And it was all leading me down this path of entrepreneurship. I didn't realize it at the time, but I realized it when I was 40. I turned 40 and did one of those girl trips to New York. There may have been some day drinking involved, I'm not sure. We may have decided to go to a palm reader, and this palm reader may have said to me, you're going to be an entrepreneur. And I said, what? No, I'm not. I have a great job. I'm not leaving my job. She goes, no, you're basically put on this earth to start your own business and to be your own boss. I don't know that I ever thought about it before this silly palm reader in New York told me that. But I will tell you this, after she planted the seed, I was thinking about it a lot.
So 2 questions about that. What year was that?
That would have been in 2009.
And second, did you go to the palm reader before or after you were negotiating for the knockoff Louis Vuittons and other Coach purses in Soho?
It's probably before.
Okay.
Because you do that in New York too. Yeah.
My wife loves to negotiate with them. It's we go into the back alleys. We haven't done it in several years, but we go back to New York every year to see my family. But anyhow, I digress. It's your story, not mine.
I love it. No, we can share that part of the story for sure, because I do that too.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, if you want to augment your leadership team, or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
Yeah, so it looked like you left Staples and did kind of your first, I'll say, tech job at SKC. What was that like, kind of moving in that conferencing and telecom tech space?
I absolutely loved it. I do think I like to challenge myself with the unknown, just trying to conquer something new. I love that family so much. It's a family-owned business. Actually, the CEO's daughter now works for me. Things have come full circle.
Oh, wow.
And I'm still very close to the CEO there, Trey Vidoc, and the former CMO, Kelly Lambert, dear friends. It was my second or third day on the job, but I I walked into Kelly's office and I said, okay, what's my budget? And this was the first time that they had hired an outside director or above. They had always tried to promote and groom within. They were, pretty diligent about that and had some rock star talent on the team that were, incredibly loyal people. So they hired me to be the VP of marketing, and they had never had that position before. There wasn't a budget for it. She kind of chuckled and said, well, there isn't a budget. And I'm like, well, okay, how am I going to do this job? And she's like, I don't know, figure it out. So started meeting, with people on the team to try to find out where's some extra money that's, hidden in little pockets around this joint that I could access. And I was meeting with some of the manufacturers. So they were manufacturers rep. So think Polycom, Plantronics, Avaya, Cisco at the time, Tandberg, all this video conferencing and teleconferencing equipment. There was this thing called MDF, Market Development Funds, that if you were marketing their product, you could get access to these funds by that regional sales manager. So when I learned that, you better believe I got really close to these regional.
A lot of lunches with the regional managers.
a lot of lunches.
Happy hours.
Maybe some happy hours. And I then created these marketing campaigns to push their products to our clients. That's at the end of the day, that's how they want to spend that money. And so I basically invented an agency within SKC that was now revenue generating. We did a summit, technology summit. The first year, I think I charged $5,000 per manufacturer. We maybe had 7 that showed up. And it was in our newly renovated space. The next year, I think I had 15 sign up, and we moved it to the Sheridan OP. The next year, we were at the convention center downtown. I think we had 35. I had the CEOs of Polycom, Plantronics, Avaya, Tandberg, that all came in to speak. I got to know all of them. We brought our whole sales team in. We probably had 60 to 80 sales team members at this time. And it became like this 3-day event that was wildly revenue generating for the company. Just being able to create something like that from nothing, that is truly what fuels me. And so that was the longest tenured job that I had. I was there almost 7 years before I moved on to the KC Chamber.
Yeah. So what prompted the move then? You were really happy there. You did some great things. Was it the boredom set in at that point?
I loved it there. I think it was more of a, what else can I accomplish before the end of my career, and maybe another itch that I needed to scratch. There was a friend and mentor of mine that was on the hiring committee. He was a member of the chamber board. He was on the committee for the CMO position. It was the first time the chamber had ever hired a chief marketing officer. And he called me and he said, I wanted you to read this job description. And so I read it and I said, yeah, sounds great. And he's like, well, what do you think? And I said, what, do I know people for this? I don't know, I'll give it some thought. He goes, no. Do you think you want to apply for this? It really didn't hit me at all when I read the job description. And then I was like, oh, well, let me read it a little bit closer and get back to you. So I did, and I thought, well, I don't know, maybe I would at least have a couple conversations. Well, a couple conversations, Jeff, turned into a 7-month job interview process.
Wow.
It was between me and one final candidate. I don't know who the final other one was, but he was a male from Chicago area. I think had lived in Kansas City previously. So we were the 2 finalists, and I finally called the recruiting firm and I said, I'm done. I'm pulling my name out. I'm not going to do this anymore. This is silly. Nothing should take 7 months.
Right.
So she said, hang on a second, let me make a phone call. So she made a phone call and she called me right back and she said, you got the job. But who knows how long it would have taken if.
I'm not sure what the Chamber of Commerce of Greater Kansas City pays, but we would think going from the position at SKC Communications to that would be a pay cut. And so what was your thought process? Or maybe it wasn't, I don't know.
It was not a pay cut. It wasn't that it was a huge leap either. When I was interviewing, they were getting ready to launch the 5 big initiatives for Greater Kansas City. And it needed to be branded. It needed to be messaged. It needed really a public launch and rollout. The ideas were there. The community conversations had happened. I was really excited that one of those big five ideas was to make Kansas City America's most entrepreneurial city. I didn't know enough about the politics behind these big five initiatives to see what would really take off and fly and what wouldn't. But I knew that I was really intrigued to be a part of something like that. I was one of those people living in the Johnson County bubble. I lived in Joco, worked in Joco, hung out in Joco. I felt like this would really challenge me in ways that I had never been challenged, and did it ever. I just this morning saw one of my former coworkers who worked on my marketing team, and she was congratulating me on all the success of Crux. And I said, you know what? I learned so many of those important lessons working for the chamber. It was truly trial by fire. There were some really tough, really, really long days, but probably learned more at that job than at any of the jobs that I've had in my career.
Another guest on the podcast has been former Mayor Sly James. So that was during Sly James's two-term reign, I'll say, as a mayor. And I just thought his leadership and what he stands for as a person, sounds like you probably would have worked with him a fair amount, because I just think I had to think the world of him. I think he's amazing. So
I got to know Sly and Joni. I got to know his security detail.
okay.
I had them on speed dial. We did a lot of events together, a lot of meetings.
And then you go to a well-recognized ad agency, Trozzolo. Why'd you go from Chamber to Trozzolo?
Again, back to an itch that maybe needed to be scratched. I had never worked for what I call a traditional ad agency in my career. I'd always hired them and collaborated with them, and sometimes had to fire them if it wasn't working out, but I never worked for one. And when I was at the chamber, I had forged a really strong relationship with Pasquale and Angelo Trozzolo, and they became friends. And I partnered with them on several projects. They did the branding for the Big Five initiative as one of those projects. So we would go to lunch maybe quarterly and just talk marketing talk. And eventually that led to, would you ever be interested in joining Trozzolo? And I think I said no for quite a while until they hit me at the right moment when I finally decided to say yes. The opportunity that they presented was to lead a new division for them, focused more on B2B professional services firms. And I love working with those types of clients and kind of wearing my CMO hat, if you will, helping them with marketing strategies. During my tenure at the chamber, I had the fortune of meeting CEOs from all walks of life, and I would hear the same two complaints about marketing. Either they hired an internal VP level, senior level marketer that didn't know how to build a strategy, or they hired that traditional agency and got a lot of creative fluff that they couldn't use to really move their business forward, really didn't align with their business goals. I found myself doling out a lot of free marketing advice. And on one occasion, one of these CEOs that became a dear friend of mine said, you know, have you ever thought about being a fractional CMO and just doing like a 3-month gig here, and then we'll get you the next gig and the next gig? And I was like, I had never thought about that before, but it definitely germinated that idea, planted that seed in my brain. But Trozzolo was knocking, and it was almost an opportunity to be an entrepreneur, standing up this new division for them without losing that safety net of having a salary and income. And at this point, I was a single mom also. So I don't think I had the courage at that point to officially make the leap. And so I took the opportunity with Trozzolo, and honestly, you know, wonderful humans. I love the business that they've built. I have huge respect for the Trozzolos. But when you're not an agency person and you think more like the client, it does start to feel like that square peg round hole syndrome again. And it was there that I started to write the business plan for Crux, a marketing solution that was led by assigning a fractional chief marketing officer to these clients, where we could build that strategy for the client. And then I realized very quickly too that you can't just hand a CEO the plan. You have to be in it with them to execute on that plan, to implement the plan. And so that was really the genesis behind this pod model that we have here at Crux.
I know myself, when I got divorced, it was definitely impacted my professional being able to, work at the level I was used to working, and, being a, single parent and, tell the listeners about that experience for you. Cause you're a hard driver, I don't know if you were I think you were at the chamber still when you got divorced, it looked like. So, but tell your experience there, how, how you overcame it and, really, just got through the process.
And I don't really have family here either. Care.com, I relied on heavily. I hired a lot of babysitters. I had a nanny for a while, and her family became good friends of myself and my daughters. And they had daughters, that were close to her age. And so could rely on them, to go pick her up if necessary as needed. My ex-husband would pick her up as necessary and needed, but she lived with me 100% of the time. He traveled a lot, so he couldn't commit to any kind of a parenting schedule. So I had her full time. My mom would come and stay for weeks at a time if I was traveling. You juggle to the best of your abilities. I will say, though, things like early dismissal Tuesdays when she was in elementary school were so hard. That was the bane of my existence because I'm working for male employers that don't really understand, hey, single mom, I don't have help here. I don't have family. I got to go get this kid by 2 p.m. and then I'll go back online. Now, that is one of the things that I really do appreciate about changing the mindsets coming out of COVID. And part of the reason that I wanted to launch my own company was to give young women that might be single moms or just new moms, young moms, that flexibility to be a mom, put that mom hat on when you have to, knowing you're going to go pick up your computer when you get home, right? We can all work virtually. Even then, we could all work virtually. I did not have that luxury. I would have to use half day PTO, things like that. And that's part of how I got through. But it definitely takes a village. I relied on a lot of friends, sometimes coworkers.
The palm reader prediction came true.
It did.
So 2016, you launched Crux. So you're in this basically corporate environment. Obviously, you're an entrepreneur in it, but you have the safety net. You're W-2 salary, benefits, healthcare. So what kind of their first 6 months, when you started Crux, what was kind of the big surprises for you? Whoa, I didn't know this was going to happen, or oh, I got to do this. What was that for you?
If there's anything that I do post Crux one day, it's going to be helping female entrepreneurs get started, because I didn't know what I didn't know, but I had a very robust network in Kansas City to lean on through my days at the chamber. And I was so blessed to have had those individuals. So I wrote the business plan. I vetted it out with probably 25 people. I am not kidding. And said, poke holes in it, tell me what I'm missing. And I was getting highly interesting. This seems really unique. I think I know somebody that could utilize this service of this unagency. That was happening while I was raising money. So speaking to that safety net, for some reason in my mind, I felt like I had to raise a lot of money. And by doing so, I was going to give a lot of equity away. And so I got to kind of the finish line of my asks, and I had raised $300,000, and I was giving 8% equity away to 6 people. So now, before I even launched my company, somebody else owns 48% of it. I sat with that for a few days. And by the way, by working at the chamber, I got very good at asking for money too.
Sure.
It's something that you get over really fast. So I do have an ability to do that. And it worked in my favor until I realized that equity piece of it, and it didn't sit well with me. And so I called my favorite serial entrepreneur who's incredibly successful, and his wife, who's a dear friend of mine, Gary and Ann Fish. And I credit them both for this decision to this day. I took them out for drinks. And I said, please impart your entrepreneurial wisdom upon me, because I don't know what I'm doing. And I walked him through the business plan. I walked him through the money that I raised. And Gary said, in his Gary style, what are you doing? You're not buying inventory. Your widgets are people. So get a friends and family loan, raise $100,000 so that you have a little bit of a safety net, hire your first employee, sign your first 2 clients, pull the ripcord and make the leap. I said, well, what about all those investors? He said, tell them thanks and hopefully you'll become clients. They were all business owners. And so I followed the Gary Fish rule of thumb for launching a business, and thank God, because I had 100% equity in Crux when I launched. And I was able to take on an investor a few years later, which we can talk about as well. But I didn't know. I thought I needed that safety net. I didn't. So I had $100,000 in a bank account when I launched Crux, didn't give away any equity, and hired my first employee and landed my first 2 clients. That's fascinating in and of itself, because now you have to price it. You have to package what it is that you're delivering. You have to deliver on it. And because I think like a client, I really underpriced it for the first several years, because it was really hard for me to increase that. Again, I wanted to be very budget conscious, sensitive to that. And then it just started taking off. So I would say at the end, we launched in July, August timeframe of 2016. By the end of the year, we had 7 clients and maybe 4 or 5 employees. Had to move out of my home. I launched in my house. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm wearing now the maid, the janitor. I'm facilities. I'm ordering office supplies. You're doing it all
Oh, yeah.
in your house. And you had a lot of people parking in front of your house, which your neighbors don't really appreciate. So that December of that year is when we moved into the Crossroads, into our first office space. It was amazing. Things were going great. Then that next full year. And then coming off the end of 2017 into 2018, we had maybe 6 clients out of 15 or 18 that didn't renew for their annual contract. We do annual contracts, as well as some project work. But back then it was mainly annual contracts. I mean, I lost sleep. I had panic attacks. I think I was so busy playing the CMO for these clients that I had taken my foot off the business development gas pedal for a while. And that was a huge learning opportunity for me to never do that again.
And about 2019, you launch Crux Accelerate. Explain what that is and kind of what, why did you're being successful. You're 3 years in. It sounds like you're doing well at this point, growing, and then you launch this new kind of division.
So Rick Cawley was one of my friends and family members who was an original investor in Crux. Dear friend of mine on the KC Chamber Board when I was the CMO.
That's right. And also a guest on the Corporate Couch. So we've interviewed Rick. Great story. Great person.
His wonderful personality. That was at a time that he had taken a pause in his career. He had left Lockton and he became an angel investor and invested in several startups around Kansas City, Crux being one of them. He and I were just through the chamber, very tapped into that entrepreneurial ecosystem of KC through that Big Five initiative. So we knew a lot of the players. We went to a lot of those startup events. We were landing Crux clients, marketing clients, several, just by nature of those networks. And I started to see the same pattern. You get to month 6 or 7, and these well-funded startups are now out of money. Why? They had a founder that was really more of a scientist, engineer, very focused on tinkering and perfecting the product or the model, but not focused on selling. So they really didn't know how to get out there and build a pipeline. Well, Rick Cawley and I could both do that in our sleep, right? So we actually co-founded Crux Accelerate as a offering fractional sales to complement what Crux was doing with the fractional CMO and the marketing components. We brought on a fractional CSO, and then we were also helping to deliver on the sales playbook, the KPI development, coaching the internal team that existed, et cetera. And so we were offering this to many of our Crux clients. We made money year 1 really without even trying, because we just took it to the Crux client base. That was in 2019. We all know what happened in 2020.
Right.
Sales, networking events, kind of everything just stopped abruptly. And so we just kind of put Crux Accelerate on hold, on pause, on autopilot. We were doing some coaching assignments, and we took the year to really listen to our clients and find out that playing matchmaker with a fractional CSO was so much more challenging on the sales side. On the marketing side, all the marketing rules apply. You just have to understand the business, the audience, and where to find them, how to speak to them. On the sales side, you really need knowledge on the product or service. And so we were trying to play matchmaker with some salespeople to the company. And it was almost becoming more of like a staffing business, and we didn't want it to be that. We did a listening tour, and we found out really what companies need is sales coaching and development for their sales teams. They need to turn their sales teams into sales performers, and they need somebody that can be that coach, that fractional chief sales officer that can come in and kind of teach an overarching sales curriculum. Ours really aligns with marketing. So if it is a Crux client, we're helping them use the marketing tools that we're building for them already. If it's not a Crux client and we look under the hood from the sales purview and we realize maybe they haven't touched their website in 6 years, maybe nobody understands the message and what is their value prop. So we can go in and offer that marketing assistance along with it. So we pivoted that model and relaunched it probably late 2023. And we now have a new chief sales officer, John Hall, who has also been on your corporate couch.
It's the place to be. The couch is the place to be, Melea.
The couch is the place to be. I'm like late to the party. You've had Rick, you've had John.
Sly.
Sly, so I'm glad to be here. So yeah, that's been the pivot, and that's going really well for us as well.
Yeah, no, it's a phenomenal story. So I think you said when you first year you had about 4 or 5 employees. So what's the employee count now after 8 years?
We are at 45, and we probably have 5 positions open right now.
Nice.
We expanded space again. We've moved 3 times now. We had 7,500 square feet. I'm looking at here, kind of the main portion off of Grand. And we've got the downtown view of the Performing Arts Center. We've got Crown Center, Union Station kind of over here. So we moved in probably 2.5 years ago now. And then a year ago, no, actually just about 6 months ago, we expanded another 6,000 square feet this direction. So we have room to grow to 100 employees here.
Very nice, very nice. So if you had advice to give to not only an entrepreneur, but maybe a woman, female entrepreneur just starting, I don't know if the advice would be different, but what maybe impart some of your wisdom. I know you want to mentor them. And
one of the things I've noticed is there's a lot of fear, like fear to ask for the money or to ask for the deal or to ask for the promotion or whatever the case might be. And I just want to infuse a little more fearlessness and confidence when I can, and help them with that ability to give themselves a pep talk. There were several times, Jeff, oh my gosh, when I was at the chamber and I was representing the CEO in the room of all white men over the age of 60, and then there's me sitting there, and you're looked at like, well, what are you doing here? What do you have to bring to the equation? Well, I have a lot to say, right? And it goes back to that boardroom when I was at McCullough, and people would just try to talk over me. That you have to be a little fearless, and you have to channel that inner confidence. Learn how to walk into a room with some gravitas, and learn how to communicate kind of at that level, but from a mindset of I deserve to be here just as much as you deserve to be here. So I do a lot of coaching with women on that, because I think that is the biggest thing that holds women back from making the leap is fear. Are they going to get told no? Well, who cares, right? Build a business case for it and rehearse it. Rehearse your talking points. Look at in the mirror of your car before you walk into an event where you're going to be maybe one of the few females in the room or what have you. I just really find myself gravitating towards helping women in those types of situations if I can.
I was going to ask you this when we met for coffee 3 months ago, but maybe you can give a short answer on, you're a founder, CEO, 45-person successful company. You were just in the Kansas City Ingram's magazine as a, glass breaker and trailblazers in terms of women executives in Kansas City. And then at least your LinkedIn, you're like on 7 boards, you're, vice chair of the KC Rep Theater, you're a mentor at HEMP, the Hellsberg Entrepreneurial Mentoring Program. You teach at associate professor at Rockhurst University since 2020, having spent one semester at KU a year ago. I know there's a lot of work involved. How do you fit everything in? And then you have somewhat of a personal life too, I'm sure, a little bit. So how do you fit it all in?
first and foremost, caffeine. You got to have a lot of energy. But I do limit myself to 2 cups a day. You have to be really passionate about it. I teach a class. One of the classes I teach at Rockhurst is called The Art of Networking, or Networking for Success. I teach people the art of connecting and what that means. It's not selling something, but it's getting to know someone so that you can be their advocate and you can pay it forward and you can help them, and then it's going to come back to you. And I believe in that. And so I'm out there walking the walk that I'm talking as well. And I'm passionate about it. And so I do share with people, get on boards. It's a great way to grow your network overnight. Boards are filled with business leaders. There's a ton of nonprofit boards out there. We are not lacking for those in Kansas City that need your help, right? That need your time and your talents and your treasures as well. But you have to be passionate about it. If you're not passionate about it, then it's going to feel like a burden that you've got to go and fit into your day. The boards that I serve on, I'm passionate about all of them. I kind of refill the well a little bit when I go to the meetings and I feel like I'm making a contribution in some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's giving them marketing advice on something or what have you, but they do fuel me. So I think that if you're going to do board service, make sure that you can commit, that you can go to the meetings. That's what they need from you. And make sure that it refills that reservoir, if you will, of energy so that you've got more to give, the next day to the next organization or what have you. But there are days that it can feel like kind of a separate full-time job, but I'm just so fortunate, Jeff. I get to wake up every morning. I love what I do. I love being a mom to my daughter, who's going to be a senior in high school this year. I have an amazing man in my life now, and I'm engaged to be married next year in May. And he helps a ton around the house. He works out of the house. So that's been a huge lift for me on that side as well. So I think it's just loving what you do, having the passion for it, and then maybe learning how to say no because I get a lot more asks
Right.
that I don't say yes to. It's hard sometimes because you want to help where you can, but when you do get spread that thin, you have to start saying no. You just have to.
Melea, there's 2 groups I love helping with great leaders like yourself and their advice. So that first group is that, early 20s, you just graduate from college. What the hell do I do now? So what advice would you have for them as they begin their professional career journey and are trying to get that first job?
I get that they're going to want to absorb as much experience and knowledge as they can. And that is the group that job hops every 2 to 3 years. And I cannot be mad about that. I cannot, because I did it, as we discussed. But what I would say to them is it doesn't have to be instant gratification. I think that our phones and technology has definitely wired their brains to have everything on demand. And they kind of forget to learn those lessons along the way, or to raise their hand and volunteer to do something that maybe does challenge their thinking and is outside of their wheelhouse. And they don't know if they're going to like it or not. I worked in various areas of marketing throughout my career to really land on what I love the most, which is strategy and communications. I wouldn't have known that if I didn't try them all out, right? And raise my hand to do so. So my advice would be slow down, enjoy the ride a little bit, raise your hand and volunteer and learn what you can learn. And then, my biggest bit of advice is mistakes happen. They happen to all of us. But the most important thing is, what did we learn from that mistake so that we don't let it happen again?
Yeah, the second group is the kind of everybody can be a leader at a company, right? You don't have to have direct reports and, have people under you on an org chart. But once you do get that promotion and you are responsible for a group of people, what advice would you give them as they begin their leadership journey?
Everyone can be a leader. I would also say not everyone is put on this planet to be a leader. And if there was the biggest nugget that I could share with you that I learned during my executive MBA, it was the difference between managing people and leading people. So managing people is working to deadlines, delivering a quality product, checking the box on getting that task done. But leadership is quite different. Leadership is role modeling behavior. Leadership is motivating and inspiring your team to perform. Leadership is knowing that what you say is going to be judged. And so you really do need to come in with a positive can-do attitude and be supportive of that team member. And so it's really knowing the difference between managing people and leading people. And if you think of it as the shadow that you're casting around your team is the shadow then that they're going to be casting around their team as they grow up and become leaders. When I became a leader, I had some good leaders over those job hops, but I had some bad ones. And I knew very clearly the ones I wanted to emulate and the ones that I didn't. And then for me, getting that executive MBA really helped open my mind to maybe some blind spots that I had in leadership. And probably one of those blind spots was understanding the importance of being that role model and coming in with a positive mindset every day because you're inspiring those people to be there.
Melea, thank you so much for coming on the Corporate Couch today. You're a pleasure to talk to, and I can't wait for our next meeting outside, maybe for a glass of wine at Yaya's.
I look forward to that glass of wine at Yaya's. Thank you so much, Jeff. You conduct a wonderful interview. I hope I didn't bore you with my stories and my job hopping route to Crux. But it's been a joy to chat with you this afternoon. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Such a fun conversation with Melea. I love her energy. All the stuff she did, I love it. And I love that job hopper conversation because people don't really talk about being a job hopper because it's kind of the default with the younger millennials and Gen Xers and all that. And I was called a job hopper, as we discussed on the podcast, but and I couldn't help it. I got kicked out of organizations. I used to say, if I join an organization or a company or division of a company, some shit's going to happen.
Something's going to happen.
But anyhow, and I loved what I love about her is her confidence and her, she really is fearless. Like she took it head on. Like, well, it looks like you're a job hopper, and I'm here for better opportunities. She wore it as a badge of honor, which really in the, during that time period, 1990s into the, early 2000s, people didn't like you job hopping.
Mm-hmm.
She, as you and I talked about offline, she not even with job hop, she went to different industries, like
completely
chainsaws,
Tupperware, plastic,
the rival company, like can openers, and she did the Garfield, some massager from Garfield. Didn't want to probe into that too much there, but Sunbeam Corp, which I think is still around, and House of Lloyd, Staples. So it was just a great conversation. And then both her high school friend said, "Oh, you told us you're going to start an ad agency," and then she was in New York in 2009 or whatever with a palm reader, said, "You're going to be an entrepreneur." She goes, "Oh, I love my job."
No, I'm not going to be an entrepreneur. Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Maybe I am.
And she started a great company. Started with one employee now in 2016, and now has 45. One of the great success stories in Kansas City as a company. So it's just great talking to her. Joe, what'd you take out of the conversation with Melea?
She's done everything right, hasn't she, as a job hopper? I was particularly struck by one of the things that she brought up, a story that she brought up when she was at Tupperware. She went to her CEO or whoever that was and said, "Are we just in the business of selling plastic? Is that the business that we're in?" That then started an entire conversation about, well, maybe we should be selling other things. Maybe we should sell linens and textiles and placemats and all sorts of other things that go along with kitchen plastics. That kind of reminded me of the story of Jeff Bezos starting Amazon, because Amazon started out not as a book company. Amazon started out when Jeff Bezos first started it in his parents' garage. He was just in the business of picking up stuff, putting them in boxes and shipping them to people. And he didn't care what he was shipping. He chose books to start with because books are easy to inventory, they're easy to classify, and they're relatively simple to ship. But he could have been shipping anything. And then from the very beginning, he knew he was going to be moving into then movies, DVDs, CDs, and games, and then what it's eventually become is essentially the Amazon of the internet. All that because Jeff Bezos knew from the very beginning what business he was really in, and it wasn't the one that was obvious. So I would challenge the listeners to the Corporate Couch to ask that question of yourself, of your business. What business are you really in? Are you really in the business of plastic? Are you really in the business of books? Or are you in the business of convenience? Are you in the business of value? Are you in the business of experience? What is it that you're in the business in, and then exploit that? I think everybody would better off if they pay attention to that.
Yeah, I love that take, Joe. That's great. So based on Melea's great insight and leadership experience, what wisdom do you have for our audience today?
We're going to go to that great philosopher named Lieutenant Frank Drebin. This is actually from the movie Naked Gun 2.5. And Lieutenant Frank said this: "The truth hurts. Maybe not as much as jumping on a bicycle with the seat missing, but it hurts."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.